missing it. I think what for me was too, was like, when I got the terms cognitive dissonance, decision fatigue, and anxiety, it really released that guilt thing, or like
Yes.
the, wait, why did I drink more than I wanted to? Like, what's going on with that? It wasn't me, it was the substance and the mental tsunami that was happening when I drank more. And once I released that, I'm like, okay, like it was so much. And that's what I want for our clients. And that freedom that comes with it is like, okay, wait, the shame game's over. Like I say that all the time here to my clients. Like that kind of ship sailed. Like this is not about that anymore, I feel. And so I love that we have all these products. Now, apparently over in Europe, they have like zero bars and everything. Like I think we're starting to get them here more, but
Yep.
there's even like places you can go without alcohol, and seeing mocktails on menus. And um, I remember the first Mother's Day that we went, my first Mother's Day being on my journey, and I felt so confident because I'd already done all this work. And I said to the waitress, I said, what kind of mocktails do you have? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, well, I'm alcohol free and I like to have like a really good mocktail. My kids were like, yeah, mom's alcohol free. It was just like, it was such a different delivery, you know? And it's almost
Yeah.
like when people started hearing gluten free for the first time, I feel like that's the tone of voice I use. It's not like a, oh, I don't drink any. I'm like, what do you got? Like, let's have fun with this. And I think that changes the narrative too, of just, and bartenders love making drinks. They're like, oh, this is interesting. And so having those products, I think, are really helpful because you
Yes.
just, I just think they are. Um,
And that's the
yeah,
thing, just because you don't drink alcohol doesn't mean that you can't have things with flavor. And that's,
yeah.
back in my day when I stopped drinking, like all we had was O'Doul's,
Oh
right?
my God. Thank God for you. I don't know how you got duels. Totally. Now there's so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that's fair. Like I picked a really good time for this. Like there's big people in the movement. There's awesome, mocktails, alternatives. Like, yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah.
And th-
Quit lit,
that's
like so
my
many books.
right.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
And there wasn't these, like, right
Yeah.
when I stopped,
Sorry.
like, and it's
Yeah.
okay because I wasn't gonna read them anyway. Or I
Right.
mean, I would have drank the beer that I'm drinking now. Like, and that's the thing that I tell people too is I still drink beer. It just doesn't have any alcohol in it.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, then it's an NA beer. And it's still a beer.
Right.
It's the flavor. Like
Yeah. It's holding the
what I
glass.
wanted, boom, it's there.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize like how much I had missed these more complex flavors because it was
Mm,
water, tea, or soda for so long.
mm,
Now you can get these amazing drinks that are just it's a complex flavor that you get to have with your meal. And it's like, oh, I didn't understand just how much I was kind of missing this,
mm,
and I am
mm-hmm.
now. But like you said, like when you start to have fun with it, and that you do this like in your mind, like it's that shift that happens. We can call it a mindset shift. We can call it whatever we want, but that shift, that moving from this is something that I have to do to this is something that I get to do, that I want to do, that I
Mm-hmm.
choose, and you take that power back, and that just makes you, so when you say it, you have that confidence, like, yeah, I'm alcohol free. What do you got for mocktails? Let's make
Yeah.
something creative, right?
Yeah,
And just
right.
that change. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And especially I know a lot of my friends and clients have said that they love their glass of wine when they cook. Like it's that habit swap. And I just
Yep.
said, well, why don't you try 0% wine? They're like, get out. I'm like, oh, it's a thing. It's definitely a
Hmm.
thing. And so just swapping that in because it's the fun glass. I've got great glassware because we've been doing this for a long time. So it's what you're pouring into it, right? And so I remember my very good friend, she's like, oh, that's such a good idea. I think it's just so new that you can just throw something else in your glass and still have that nice feeling. And just not alcohol.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you mentioned in the background too, like you were worried about the fear of what would this look like without alcohol? What would this life be? Would I'm guessing that was around the, could I have fun? Could I do things that were interesting? Like, is it just going to be kind of that one note? No, I go and do this thing and kind of just have water, I guess, because I don't know what else I can do. Was that kind of the fear that you were talking about that was there?
Yeah, I think it was the also just knowing that the other programs out there that look at alcohol that didn't fit me. And it fits loved
Mm,
ones. So I think that that's great for them. But I'm like, okay, but what if I want to change mine? What does that look like for me? Like, I don't understand, like it, because I didn't know about what we do. Like, I didn't know this was a world.
yes.
And so I think I love that you have a podcast. I love that you talk about it. I think it's wonderful that one positive of social media is that people are out there sharing this narrative and this lifestyle, because I'm glad, what that phrase is like, you know what you know, wait, you don't know what you don't know. And I
Hmm.
didn't know this lifestyle in this way. And that's why I'm so passionate about coaching and talking about it, because the more people hear, the more of a choice it is of a, wow, I want to give that a try. And so I also, the fear was I didn't understand why I was having this like angel devil reaction, because I was so good at my mind. Like I was a teacher, I was so good at goal setting. I was so good at people. I'm the one in the airport that hears everyone's life story. I love people. I love talking, and hearing and connecting. And then when it came to this relationship with alcohol, like what is going on? Like, and then I just started kind of looking into it. So I was kind of fearful of that relationship, and like, what did it mean? And I gave that fear too much power, because there's nothing. But I thought there was something, but there was nothing. And so once I did the work, I'm like, okay, it just was like this thing called cognitive dissonance and anxiety, and those didn't align with who I was, and here we are. But that was it. I also have a very big drinking environment here in terms of friends. But I had done like those challenges, and I have always taken at that point 2 weeks off. So like I knew what that felt like, but I think forever. And like I say to my clients, I'm like, we're not in this for like, we're just doing it one step at a time.
Hmm.
Like now it's forever for me, but I didn't know that on July 8th of 2022. I didn't know it was going to be forever. And I think that that's a good way of approaching this change, is that we don't need to think about it in forever right now. It's just, let's try to feel good about our path. And then that alleviates the fear. I have a client who is like, feels like it might be boring. And like, how does that life feel like? And so we just kind of swap in kind of thrill seeking things. Actually, I am having her go to like we figured we could go to one of those axe throwing places. I'm
Yeah,
like, let's get thrill other ways, kind of, or like there's these
absolutely.
glass breaking places. So I think that's where the coaching really comes in, is like to look at the swaps and like, what do we think alcohol does? And then how can we bring something else in it to help fill that void that you're feeling? I mean, that's
Yeah,
real.
absolutely.
Um, but for me, it's the social thing. But I was out, but now because I think of you guys like that didn't have the cool menus. And so now I'm out with friends. I'm like, oh, do you have a cool menu? And they do, but I'm sorry that they did it back then. But so thank you for
Yeah.
trailblazing. But I don't think it's going to be that foreign of a feeling anymore, which is great.
Yeah, and what you've come back to and you've hit on these points is having that understanding of that's what this is, and it gives you that understanding of yourself. So now it's, instead of having that shame, like what is this, like I'm good at setting goals, I'm good at doing this, but this one thing just has a little bit of power over me.
Mm-hmm.
And now as you get that understanding of yourself, it's like, oh, I'm not condoning that, but now I understand what it was. So now I can
Totally.
move past it because it's not giving me this, that confusion anymore. That what is this? And that focus is, it's going to something else. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what's really powerful for me too, is that understanding that can come with being honest with yourself, and then having these different terms, cognitive dissonance, anxiety, um, and all these other understandings that we have of life, but we don't put them to alcohol. We don't put them to, let's say, workaholism, let's say
Mm-hmm.
gambling, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
so many other things in life that are honestly the same. It's just we don't put those words to it. So now that we have these understandings and these words, we're putting them to it. Oh, it's giving us that bridge that we didn't know was needed to understand ourselves and then give ourselves compassion.
Things that you can just start to get into that then help you as a kind of therapy rather than just the talking therapy. A lot of people, from myself, I run as therapy. I do martial arts as therapy. Some people game as therapy. And actually, during the pandemic, especially, there was research into mindfulness. I think it came out of University of Cambridge, how mindfulness and well-being was actually improved in real time through specific gaming. I think it was actually Plants versus Zombies. Love that.
Makes
And
sense.
yeah, and Farmville. I think it was Farmville or something like that. Those were the two that they used. And despite older research that kind of said that gaming was bad for it, none of that was in real time. They did this in real time, and it showed mindfulness, mental health and well-being improved during that time in real time. And there's a lot of research about how hobbies can help you about these things. And I was like, well, okay, so this isn't just my thought process. This isn't just me. I'm a very kind of facts and figures person. I was like, okay, so this is just a thing. So let's do something about it. Let's do it. We hit a roadblock kind of immediately because of nonsensical ways in how we do it in the UK. The way when it was originally created, we actually lost one of the original trustees because they had other commitments. So we kind of rebranded. Well, it didn't rebrand, but we kind of relaunched, got the right things in place, and then went for it again with a load more things. So we now have a load of videos online that are always being updated as well, that are in cooking, that are how to start a podcast, that are how to throw yourself in martial arts, things that you might get into that might help your mental health, that might be something that you find enjoyable. There's so many people out there that like cooking. Okay, well, here's a couple of recipes. Why don't you follow this and put yourself in a place where you're like, okay, this is a good place for me. This is relaxing for me. This is good for me, because that's still therapy. It's therapeutic and by default therapy. So that's what we do as a mental health charity. We've now also brought in the training for practitioners in mindfulness to try and bring that into it as well. And we also started last year and continuing to this year to be in real life, so to speak. So we're going to be out in the public. We did our martial arts for mental health, which was showing people kind of get them involved in martial arts and having more of a connection with their own body, but also talking about how there's an interaction with anxiety and things like that in the same space. So I kind of garbled that into one, but that's kind of who we are. We are a mix of different things. And the main thing is, if it works for you, it works for you. And we don't necessarily want to go down the same standard paths as everybody else.
And that's that's the beauty. For those who don't know, like, I am also a trustee for Up for Mental Health. And that's the beauty of it, though. Like, when we talked about it, that got me excited is being able to take these things and translate it to, oh, you can use this in your real life right now. Like, these are things that you can take and do that will give you a return on investment that is very quick, instead of just people saying, oh, you should do this thing for your mental health. And it's like a very high barrier for entry, which for people in the United States, people in the UK, from like what I've heard all around the world, getting it, finding that therapist is a high barrier for entry because there's wait lists. There's, in the United States, it can be expensive. Other places, like, you're worried about the stigma that's attached to it. But if you go to a group of people who are learning martial arts, that's something you can do really quick. It's a very low barrier to entry, and you get those returns very quick. You learn how to cook. That return on investment is very immediate. And now all of a sudden you can use that and you get into this, oh, I actually enjoy doing it. This is something that I've always kind of thought, oh, I would like to learn how to do this, but I've just stopped myself from doing it. And now that there's an easier way to start, there's this video online that I can follow. Oh, I really like this. I like how this tastes. And I feel really good afterwards too. Like, better than I do when I have Taco Bell or McDonald's, or, insert your fast food here. And now you have some more control over that. And that's what it's all about, is being able to take things that they seem like maybe it would be a little bit far off in the future. How can I use it now so that I can start to really enjoy it? And you never know the benefits that you actually get from them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not gonna, like, you're not coming to one of our things to become John Jones. That's not what it's about. But it is kind of bringing you into the kind of go, okay, and we do them in kind of spurts of like a month of doing it, because we don't want it to be a kind of standard cooking class or standard martial arts class or anything like that. It's about kind of having that interaction and understanding yourself, and then giving you an idea of, okay, well, this is something I think I'm going to actually take on board. This is something that's definitely helped me with my anxiety, with my social issues. I'm going to find a club, or something like that. And so it's giving you a way to kind of, okay, let's try this without having to, like you say, with a therapist, there's waiting list. Yes, there's cost in certain places, but also the other one, and probably the one I think probably gets more people, is who gets the right therapist first time out? Like,
Yeah. Yes.
it doesn't
Yes.
happen. You just, you have to go through all of them. And if you're having to pay for it, or you're on a waiting list, that's just hellish. Whereas if you know that something helps you, if you know that when you're feeling stressed, you go into your room and you game, hey, that gaming's probably helpful kind of therapy. So let's figure a way of getting you into that space then. Let's figure a way of helping you. Now, maybe in the future we'll be able to get a game developer to come in and teach some basic code. I don't know. There's loads of things we can, there's everything we can do if if it's there. So I think that's the thing as well. It does just give you that ability to immediately start. There's the video, and these are videos that are made for us. They're not on YouTube. So there's the video. Right, we can interact with that. Okay. Oh, I really get, and I've said this before, if there's something you like, this really helps me, tell us. We'll find someone well, this is also, the people that are doing these videos know what they're doing. We haven't just gone down the road. We haven't just gone to the pub and said, anyone know how to cook? Like, we actually got people that have worked in, like, for the cooking videos, for instance, they are people who have worked in kitchens and have done, and for the martial arts, they are trained martial artists, and podcasts. RJ's on there. RJ's one of the videos telling you how he started podcasts. So that's the thing for that. I think yeah, and like you say, it's a low barrier to entry, and I think that's really important, because how many people, when they're in just a low mood, I'm not talking about people in crisis, because that's something we don't really deal with, because that's why we have those numbers, because those numbers on our resources, they have emergency numbers. But if you're somebody that's really suffering from stress, I just need to do something. Well, hey, why don't you try this? It's there. It's there. It's free. It's easy to access. You don't have to worry about anybody judging you. I think that's kind of behind it as well.
And that you don't have to worry about anybody judging you thing. Like, that is something that is the lowest barrier to entry. Is, yeah, there's nobody else there to worry about how they're looking at you. It's just, if I fuck it up, I fuck it up.
Yeah.
And try again. Or, nah, this isn't for me, I fucked it up. Or wait until you feel like trying it again and seeing how it goes. Like, it doesn't have to be this massive thing that we build it up for. Like, something that I use as a hobby is cooking. And I know when I get away from cooking, because my mental health, where I start the day is lower than it would be if I had been cooking some meals during the week and really putting myself out there. So, like, that's something that I pay attention to now. But how I got started was Blue Apron. Like, I had cooked a little bit, but I didn't cook a lot because I didn't know that many recipes, didn't really know my way around. So I decided, when my oldest child was born, I'm going to order Blue Apron for a couple months to make it easier for, my ex and I with the kids. We don't have to go shopping. The recipes are right there. I just make it. We have a decent meal. And that taught me how to cook for myself. It was basically taking a cooking class, but it was all like right there. And so having these YouTube videos like laid out, or the videos laid out so that there's not super long, really easy to understand, that it's that same thing. Like, okay, I could do this pretty easily. And if it takes me longer than what the video is, that's okay. There's nobody here to be like, that took so long. Like, I want to eat now. I want to eat right now. Like, come on. But instead, it's just, you get to focus on what you're doing and see how you actually enjoy it rather than how somebody else is kind of waiting on what you're doing.
Yeah, I was going to ask what Blue Apron is, but I think you've explained it there. I've heard of similar things, like a box that comes through with recipes, right?
That's exactly what it is. It's the box, like 3 to 4 meals at a time you can choose. It gets delivered to you with the recipes in the box.
Yeah.
And then it walks you through step by step. Everything's pre-measured. So you just take it and pour it in. And yeah.
I mean, that's how a lot of people, that type of thing is how a lot of people start. I mean, I don't know about you, but in the UK, when I was at secondary school, I had cookery class, which is actually quite funny because I knew how to cook beforehand because my mum was a baker. But so making bread in my class was brilliant because I didn't actually follow the recipe. I followed my mother's.
I didn't want to go back to counseling, but the owner of the treatment center was like, you need to go back and get your certified addiction counselor. You have like half of it done. And so I was like, yeah, maybe I am a good counselor. And he's like, yeah, we'll put you in this position. And so it's like me and another guy like running this treatment center. I work with him now at this other treatment center. We both left and he pulled me over here. So I work in a treatment center that's not a treatment center. It's in-home addiction treatment. So I go to the client once a week. It's pretty cool. It's pretty progressive, I guess you could say, in terms of addiction. And I thought, oh, wow, I don't know about this, but it's working very well. I had the clients for a year. So it's pretty cool. I've had like multiple clients graduate. That's pretty cool. So now what do? I just started playing on Twitter one day, like maybe 2 years ago. I don't even know it was that long ago, maybe a year and a half. And I made a recovery Twitter, and I was just like, oh, I'm going to post cute little graphics and like, I don't know, just play around. And I didn't really go on it much. And then I started to get into it, and I don't know why, what really happened. I just started posting more and getting to know people. And I was like, this is wild. Like, this is a big community and people are pretty cool. For the most part, right? So
yeah.
So that's kind of how it started. And then I remember I had a friend that was into YouTube, and he was making a lot of videos and stuff. And he's like, why aren't you doing videos like that? You could be, instead of just writing posts. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm a little self-conscious. I don't want I don't know, like how I look or whatever. I just saying, he's like, what? I was like, I don't know. So I just was like, F it, I'm going to do it. And I got good feedback. And so I've been doing it. I took a couple of weeks off because I have so much stuff and I can't, it's like I try to divide all my attention and it doesn't work. So I have to like go back and forth. But I think that's pretty much, I don't know, ask away any questions. I probably forgot about stuff, as always.
I hear you completely with the life like starts to get more. And so it's like, what is going to take the, priority? What's going to take a little bit of a backseat for a little bit, but then noticing that things are taking a backseat and now you get more time. That's when, you can start to add things in. And that's been important for me in, especially like, as I'm really discovering myself past, the drinking and everything, is what in my life adds to it. And then there's obviously things that are always going to happen in life that kind of take away from, or take some of your attention and time away. So those things that add to it aren't going to be there every single day, but noticing that those things aren't there, how can I get back to them to be able to feel that fulfillment? Like that's such a powerful thing to be able to take stock of your life and, take that inventory. And I think sometimes we forget that you can actually do that, and it's a good thing. And life doesn't just have to be happening, right? You can actually take life and make things happen.
Beautifully said. I think that I forgot about it for a couple of years. And then a few weeks ago, I'm like, hey, I don't want to go on the internet today. And I was like, I made it like half a day, but I was like, I can choose to do whatever I want. And it was just like funny because I'm like saying this to myself and I'm like, duh, Lindsay. It's like, what is good for you? Like, you don't have to do anything. So that was cool,
And that's a great point too. Like these lessons that we learn, right? Sometimes we take them for granted and we just kind of like forget them. And then it's like, oh yeah, I can actually do this thing. That's right. I remember that now. How did I forget that?
I do that all the time. It's like, I don't know if people think I'm joking when I'm like talking about it on YouTube or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, like just obvious things that like I forget all the time. And I'm talking recovery all day and it doesn't matter. I still am like, oh, that's right. Something so simple, you know, it's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah,
Every day
that
experience though.
absolutely. I listen to a lot of different like business and then, you know, I guess I'll call it holistic health, like
Mhm.
podcast stuff like that. And something that they talk about is like the curse of expertise. Like when you gain this knowledge that is, you start to get beyond the basics. Sometimes you forget just those basic level things because you've moved past that. So you've had to take your knowledge and then just like add it too. So sometimes we can kind of forget some of those basic things. So when we come back to them, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, that is the first part. That is the first step, right? So
So true. I like that. I've never heard that before, but it's like I'll get to the point where I'm like, all right, back to the basics. I forgot about the basics. It's like, what? That's crazy.
and for people who are athletes, like this is huge. This is why you teach fundamentals at every single level, because
Oh,
without
yeah.
those fundamentals, you can't build on the skills above it. So you get back to doing things the right way, the simple things. And then all of a sudden you see those more advanced skills start to get a little bit better. That's something that I love to do, is like take things from that a lot of people have experience with. Like even at a young level, you were taught the fundamentals again every single year, like let's say fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, and
Yeah.
so on. And it can be the same thing where you relearn those fundamentals so that you can start to do those more advanced things. And I I go through that a lot of the time too. Like I go through cycles of journaling where I'll go for like 4 or 5 months of journaling every single day. And then I'll take like 2 months off because I'm just like, I just can't right now. And
Yeah.
then I'll go like 2, 3 times a week for a little while. And then I'll ramp it back up to every day. And it's like, that's just, I don't know. I feel like that's a cycle, right? Like
I do it too. That's funny. Yeah, I do the same thing. It's like I just forget about it or something. I don't know. I'm like, later. And then I'm like, maybe not for a while. It's fine.
I'm very loud about not drinking. I was a very loud drinker. Like anyone who had spent one night out with me was like, holy shit, this guy gets after it in a way that maybe isn't normal. So there's
yes.
a stark contrast for people who knew me a few years ago till now that I think people are still getting used to who know me.
Absolutely. And that's still continued and been a little bit of a theme through my life. Like it's just always evolving. And when you can accept that you're always evolving, you can find the fun in those evolutions, right? And then acceptance of where
Yeah,
you're at right now.
totally.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to circle back with too is like talking about the kratom. I can't remember the
Yeah,
correct
you
pronunciation.
can't really say it wrong. It's technically kratom.
Okay,
Um,
kratom.
that's how it's said in Southeast Asia. I'm still probably getting it wrong, but it's closer to that. And of course, we've Americanized it into kratom, like the
Yeah.
most American pronunciation possible. So I say kratom, which is sort of an in between.
So before you and I talked, I'd never heard of this. And then one thing that's really cool is on your website, you break things down and like give history and the effects and everything. And you made sure you told me like before you try this, please go on and get the information so you're making an informed decision. And
Yeah,
since I've like read that, I've seen like stuff about kratom all over the place. I see it on like vaping bars and stuff like this. We have kratom. It's like, you know, what is it about kratom that like is starting to really pick up and get used, I guess?
yeah. Well, I think it's still pretty new to the US. This is a
Mm-hmm.
plant that's been consumed for hundreds or even thousands of years in, Thailand and Indonesia and Vietnam, Malaysia. Um, the US, I think it was first brought over by Vietnam veterans, and it kind of found its way into the market in the late 90s or early 2000s. And it's really only in the last like several years that it's become something that anybody knows about, right? It's for the most part been stuck in the smoke shop environment and sold in these kind of like seedier settings, right next to like bongs and Bob Marley posters and stuff, and even like bath salts and crazy shit like that, or synthetic marijuana. So it's gained a little bit of a negative or unwarranted reputation as one of those products, when the reality is it's a plant, right? That just found its way into this obscure environment in our society. I think that it's picking up steam in the US for the same reason that I'm accessing it, right? It's a tool that people are using as a harm reduction tool, right? To get away from more harmful substances like alcohol, or even, Oxycontin or opioids like that. Because it does have a psychoactive property. So it does replace the effects of those. But it's something that you can use generally without like harming your system. Yeah, I think it's in the potency that's why it's like gained in popularity so much in recent history here in the US. But it's interesting that now that you've heard of it, you're seeing it everywhere, right? There's some of that is just like a psychological process, but also
Right.
maybe the algorithm is targeting you now. Here's you talking about it. It's serving you kratom ads.
And yeah, I've had people like bring up stuff about it, like in conversation, that's just been like, where's this? Somebody told me about a kratom bar, and they're popping up in Denver, stuff like that. And then I was driving home, and there's a smoke shop, and I've seen that LED, that sign that goes through, and all of a sudden, big letters, we have kratom, and I'm like, well, that's new, because that message was not on there. Like, interesting. So I'm just starting to see it more and more, kind of like, you don't see too many of the red cars. You buy a red car, now you see the red car everywhere, like you're saying with the psychological properties.
Yes, exactly. And it's, the kratom industry, if you can call it that, it's starting to transform a little bit with products like ours with New Brew. Like I said, the plant had really found its way into like shots and capsules that are super high potency, that are like really high concentrated, and sold in those smoke shop environments. And they're kind of catered towards people who are like trying to get high, right? Like people who are really, really trying to feel something. Whereas now there's products like ours that are more true to the traditional use case in Southeast Asia at like a very low serving size. It acts as this like very mild stimulant, and provides a little bit of like mild euphoria as well. The kratom tree is scientifically in the coffee family. It's like a close cousin of the coffee plant, right? So it does have like a similar mild stimulant property that you would get from a caffeine, except for it also happens to make you feel good. But yeah, a lot of what kratom is known for in the US is those high dose sort of preparations that a lot of folks will use to get off of opioids, right? Like if you are trying to get off of something like Oxycontin or Vicodin, you do want something that's a higher serving size. I would say that it's sort of unfairly been pigeonholed into that space, because there is this whole other like low serving size use case that we're after here. So there's so many different ways to use it, because at different serving sizes, it has a very different effect.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing to really point out when it comes to you're looking into this is, just like anything else, you can abuse caffeine. You can abuse so many different things. Like when you take it to really, depending on what you're doing, like have that comfort, and it gets in the way of things. But
yeah,
and that's what, every time you describe it, like I'm always like, that sounds a lot like coffee. And then you're like, right after I'm thinking that, you're like, oh, it's a close cousin of the coffee family. Okay, that makes sense. Like, yeah.
The difference with the energy it gives you is it's more of a calm energy. You don't get the jittery feeling that you get when you drink a bunch of coffee. It's more mellow than that. It's kind of hard to explain to people who haven't experimented with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, it's, and this is the reason that I wanted to have like an initial call with you before I even came on the podcast. It can be abused, like with anything else that feels good or that really works. People can build an unhealthy relationship with it. I think, compared with alcohol, having like a habit with kratom it's not going to like harm your body the way that being an alcoholic would or drinking every day. But still, like you can build an over reliance on it and have that kind of like crutch type relationship with it. So for me, as someone who's dealt with alcohol abuse disorder, I'm very careful to be mindful with my use of kratom or with kava, anything that's like mind altering at all. I want to keep it in that space where it's a tool that I can access and not have it cross that line into being a crutch, like something that I feel I need every day, or like I can't get through my day or perform the tasks I need to without it. And that's true of coffee. It's true of anything, any tool that I access in my life.
It's true of cookies for me, right? And
Oh
like, I'm
yeah,
not
sugar.
making light. Yeah, like I'm not making
Yeah.
light. Like that is true that we can take things and put it into different areas. And that is something that I want people to take away, is being mindful and aware of how it's affecting you. And if you try something and you're like, I'm not a big fan of what it's doing to me and how I'm feeling on it, that's great information to know, so that you can say, this just isn't for me, I'm going to move in a different direction.
Yeah. It's all about being honest with yourself too, right? I think, we have a tendency to put things like alcohol on a pedestal. I know I used to. And when I was looking to quit drinking, I was so hyper focused on the alcohol itself, like on the actual beverages, right? When the reality was the way I was using it was about my relationship to alcohol and like my intent behind using it. And it took me a while to uncover that and to start going a level deeper and think about why it was that I had built this relationship with alcohol, which started at such a young age. Like I was like 12 years old when I started drinking pretty heavily. So it was even that much harder to go back and figure out why I was doing that at that age, right? It had been almost 2 decades. But I came to understand that I was using alcohol as a way of numbing myself. Like I was trying to run from something. I was trying to avoid a set of really uncomfortable feelings. So it was that relationship to alcohol. That was a symptom of a much deeper issue, right? It wasn't about the alcohol itself. So that's one of the first things I tell friends who are struggling with their use of alcohol, right? It's like, well, just let's talk about why it is that you are reaching for this, because alcohol is such a powerful numbing tool, right? Maybe the best one, the most effective one. Like 10 times out of 10, when you drink, you're going to have an easy time avoiding the deep sadness that you're feeling, the really dark memory that you have about something with a loved one, whatever it might be. It will disconnect you and give you a brief period of time where you don't have to feel that. You don't have to think about that. Unfortunately, after that period of time is over, you're going to feel like shit and you're going to be thinking about that thing even more. And you get trapped in a cycle. So that's a cycle I was in for, almost 2 decades. And it was a really difficult one to break.
And that's the key word, embrace it. Because, so many people, when they want to leave something behind, I do understand that for some people, some things could be hurtful and they want to leave that behind and they want to forget it and, like just put it in, inside a drawer and forget that even exists. But I actually embraced every single thing, like the good ones, the bad ones. And I'm like, I learned what did I learn from this? Like, this was terrible. I don't know. I lost my dad. That was like the worst moment in my life because he was like my best friend. And I'm like, okay, this is shit, I don't know if can I swear here?
Yep. We say
okay,
fuck
cool.
Shit, damn.
I love it. So that was terrible. So but I still was like, but what is this teaching me? And it taught me so much. Like, life's too short to be like, crying and whining and, like, get up and try again. You failed? Good. Get up and try again. Tomorrow's a new day. Not even tomorrow. Like right now, you can change. You don't have to wait until Monday. You don't have to wait until next year or your birthday or whatever is special for you. Like, life is too short. And what matters in the end is, the memories that you have and like do you have any regrets? Like, that's the thing. Like, if I wanted to dress all black and everyone was looking at me, I don't regret it because I wanted that at that time. So now looking back, I'm like, I don't regret it because I did what I wanted to do. So, and you know, the same with other things. Like, I decided to study this or that, or meet this person. It didn't work out, but what did I learn from them? And I feel like everyone who comes in our lives are like teachers, you know, for the better or worse, but we always learn something.
Yeah. And embracing the fact that there's lessons from every person can get you to a point of being able to forgive yourself for not making a decision that would have led to a better outcome, but understanding that you made a decision based on the information that you had at the time and not the information that you have right now when you're looking back on it. And that can help you to really forgive the past or use it in the way that's going to take you forward in the best possible way. And that's part of embracing and understanding that, you know, let's go back to our ADHD diagnosis, understanding that, yeah, we have ADHD. That doesn't mean that we can't do the things that are challenges. It just means we can recognize those challenges and what can I do with my life to make those challenges more manageable? Or
Yeah.
can I say that I got a lot done today and I can recognize that right now I'm not going to be able to battle this executive dysfunction. I'm not going to be able to battle, you know, the easy distractibility or the how transitions can be really difficult. So I'm just going to embrace it and just say, whatever happens, happens. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also have seasons. Like, I feel like if you make the most out of them, you might have a season where you're like super exhausted and, you know, you don't have the bandwidth to hang out with friends, go out, like be social. That's okay. Like, take that time to reflect on yourself. Maybe you have a season where you're like super active, you know, hyperactive. Well, use that for your business, use that energy to build a business, or, you know, for work or whatever you do, or any hobby that you want to achieve. Maybe you're learning a language and you're like, okay, I'm feeling like super hype right now. So yeah, I'm going to go all in with that language. So yeah, I feel like if we see our lives as, you know, seasons, I think that's a great way to advance. And you know what, the other day in my podcast, I interviewed a friend, a fellow copywriter, who has had a very interesting and difficult life. She's been dealing with MS, and she's super young to have MS, so multiple sclerosis, for people who don't know what that is. And she moved to China, and she was telling me that she really enjoys reading, and yeah, she at a moment she talked about her I don't remember the exact place. Yeah, her Houston chapter. She lived in Houston, and I was like, "Did you say chapter? Because you divide your life into chapters because you're a writer?" And she was like, "That's actually interesting." It was like, "No, but now that you mentioned that, I do notice that I have like different chapters in my life. I have like the China chapter when I lived in China. I had the Houston chapter when I lived in Houston, and I had like my 9 to 5. Now I have my new chapter where, you know, I have my own business and I get to do what I want and work with the people I want." So, and that reminds me too, one of you were asking me about now they're coming to my head, like the moments, my aha moments in the podcast, and one of them was that is completely related to this is when I had with one of my best friends who was in my podcast. That one's in Spanish, unfortunately. But yeah, she moved all the way to Australia, and she said she didn't want to have an ordinary life. She wanted to have an extraordinary life. She loves traveling, like, and she loves what she does. And she said I look at my life, and she actually wrote a book. She I met her when I was struggling with mental health disorders and ED, because she was in the same boat. And now she's at a completely different level, and she's like blooming, and she's this beautiful person. And she told me, like, I look at my life as like, I'm the writer, I'm the author, and like, if I were the main character, what would I do? And that's when you realize, like, you don't have to be on the driver's seat. You can be you can write your own story. Whenever you're like at a moment where you're questioning something about your life that doesn't make you happy, what would the main character do if this was a movie? What would they do? And you have these different chapters, which I think it's a really cool concept.
And you saying that, there's a moment in my life that is really important, with a really similar understanding that I came to, and it came through our mutual friend Up, who
Really? Tell me about it.
I was explaining how I felt going through life, and he told me, we're all the main characters of our own story. And in somebody else's story, you are going to be the antagonist. You're going to be the villain. And you don't have control over that. It doesn't matter if you acted perfect or not. You are going to be the villain in somebody else's story. And so as you go through, understand that you can only be the main character of your own story. When he was telling me that, I understood what he was saying, but later on, I realized I was actually acting like a side character in my own story.
Right.
And so when I realized that I didn't fully resonate with what he said at that moment, was because I was a side character. And when I started to act like the main character of my story, that was when things really started to change. And so you saying writing your own story, and you are the author or the main character or both, right? And how that touched you, like, yeah, that's a very similar way it touched me. And sometimes it's easy to have people or have things in your life that become the star of your solar system that you orbit around. And you're so focused on them that you forget that you're actually a star of your own.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not orbiting around anyone. You're just moving through life. And when you realize that, oh yeah, I'm a star, and everybody else is a star, it makes it going through life a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but it just allows you the understanding that when somebody moves out or something, and I'm going to use somebody else can move in. Somebody else important in your life can come into your life. It's
Right.
not going to look the same. It's not going to be the same. But that space gets taken up in a different way. And it can be painful, but it can also be hopeful. And having those seasons like you're talking about too, it's an important way to look at it, because sometimes winter has to come through in order for spring to bloom.
True.
And I found my little online community, right? And it was great. And I'm like, I wanted some friends, here locally that I could hang out with, that, because like my whole crew of people, there was a big drinking environment. And
Yeah.
you're first and become a non-drinker, you're wobbly, right? You don't, like, I'll be honest, when I was during the pandemic, it was kind of good that I quit drinking then, because I could hide behind that, because you couldn't go out and hang out in restaurants and bars and do all the things.
Yeah.
Like it was different.
Absolutely.
And it was a great excuse to hide behind, right?
Yep.
So, and I avoided some of my friends at the beginning just because I didn't want to tell them, because again, what if I failed? And I didn't know how I was going to respond, and I was really nervous to tell my friends about it, but, at some point you have to. And, but I wanted to find some other like-minded friends. And so I kind of like found a couple of ladies in Atlanta. That's where I am, in Atlanta. And, we'd go have lunch or something here and there, but it was really hard to corral people together. And I knew when I saw life on the other side of alcohol, I knew I wanted everybody else to know about it, and I know some of us that are sober now, we might come across as, oh, everything is so wonderful, but it is like every day is wonderful, but I just not living that hell, that Groundhog Day over and over and over, and never having a hangover, and never having to pick up your phone and scroll through your text messages and see, what did you do, and try to piece together the night? Oh my God.
Yes, that was my morning every time.
Who do I need to apologize to?
Yep.
Who do I need to pay off so they don't tell anybody what I did? Like, that's no way to live.
It absolutely is not. And, that's the thing when you stop drinking, is you realize the choices that you didn't know you had. And so now when you realize these choices, you can do a lot of things different.
Yeah. And, you don't realize, like, I didn't realize when I was a drinker, we're operating on autopilot. And that's why, when you wake up with a hangover and you're like, all right, I'm not drinking today. And then come 5 o'clock, you're like, oh, a glass of wine sure does sound good right about now. But that's because you're addicted to it. We don't know this.
Right.
We don't know this, we don't know that that's why our brain has been trained to crave wine at 5 o'clock or whatever, whatever your schedule is.
Yep.
It's trained for that, and even though you don't want to do it. And so, it's just really, it was so eye-opening when I listened to This Naked Mind and I studied that book, and just realizing that it's not my fault. It's a legit series of chemical reactions in your body, and it's not because I'm weak or anything like that. And that's what society would have us believe, right? So I was so scared to tell people, but I didn't know then what I know now, right? But what I did know is that I wanted everybody else to know about it, and I wanted to find some friends that were sober, or, that I could hang out with and feel safe. Until I felt comfortable. And now I'm comfortable, and it doesn't matter who's drinking around me or whatnot. Like, I know I'm not going to have any, and I'm okay with that. I don't feel like I'm missing out. I'm not sitting there just like, white knuckling it, like people say. It's just, I'm at peace. And I think that's the best part of living an alcohol-free life, is the peace that comes along with it. Because I've never been more at peace in my life.
Same. And that's the thing about going through coaching programs and hearing podcasts and learning about things, is you get these tools and these tips that can help you find that peace. What has been really helpful for you in cultivating that peace that you have?
Wow, that's a great question. You know what? So I'll just kind of take you through the last year for me. So first of all, I got a certification in gray area drinking, and I studied under Jolene Park, and she's amazing. We learned about nervous system regulation and just lots of ways to deal with cravings and things like that. And and then as soon as that was over, I started on This Naked Mind. And the two of those just complement one another so well, because This Naked Mind really focuses on the cognitive piece and the cognitive dissonance that we have around alcohol, and how society and all of that kind of stuff influences our opinions and our subconscious beliefs and all of that kind of stuff. But then the gray area drinking piece of it really focuses on, how do you deal with cravings? Like, really deal with them. Like, what are some things that you can do right now, today, that can help you in that moment. And so, you know, those two together are what, you know, really help. You know, and I share those with folks all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's really useful in how the brain, understanding how the chemical reactions, hormones, all of that alcohol can have, but not just that, your beliefs, your, you know, when you're making behavioral changes, things like that, understanding the process in the brain is huge in helping you to work through. But then the nervous system regulation, like you said, and being able to implement that into the now, how you can combine those things, like that is really how you attain peace.
Well, once I got those two certifications, like now I just have this incessant thirst for more knowledge. And that's why I started talking about that. I forgot about the real question that you asked me, but that's what I mean, I'm a voracious consumer of books, mostly on Audible. And what I really wind up doing, I'll order it and listen to it on Audible. I like it so much. And I realize that, oh, this is a great resource, not just for me, but my clients. So I wind up ordering the hard copy of it, highlighting that one up. And then I'll tell anybody that will listen that they've got to go buy this book and listen to it, or, you know, because I just have continued to learn more and more and more about myself. And the more I learn, the more I want to share it with others, you know, because I got the gray area drinking. I'd listened to This Naked Mind that like totally changed my life. Then when you stop drinking, there's all kind of other things that pop up that you weren't expecting, right? And the emotional sobriety, because when you just put away the physical drink, that's one thing, you know, you're sober, but are you emotionally sober? And that was the piece that was missing for me. And I didn't really realize it until the past couple of years. And so I've really been doing a lot of work on myself, and it's a lot. And I think a lot of people that you know, have put alcohol aside or do the same thing or find the same things. I mean, I don't know. Have you experienced that? I know you've got a lot more sobriety under your belt than I do, but.
Yeah. I mean, so December will be 10 years for me, but it was 6 years of just dealing with the physical and not dealing with the emotional. And as I have dealt with the emotional, and that's coming up on 4 years, my life has continuously gotten more fun for me. I've had more enjoyment. I've been more me. And now like this RJ feels like the most authentic RJ that I've been my entire life. There's been pieces that have been throughout, but as you said, the more that I get to know myself, the more that I get to understand and embrace my own humanness. And in that, understanding my inner dialogue with emotions, with past experiences that my brain is like, well, this happened in the past, so that's probably a pattern. It'll probably keep repeating. It's like, no, I'm choosing that to repeat. Let's not choose that to repeat because I'm sick of repeating that one. And you start to understand and see how things are happening. And at first, and I think this is where people get hung up, at first it takes a lot of mindfulness and awareness and being aware of how you want to change and like the thoughts and stuff. But as it's just like any other skill, the more you do it, the more that you realize it, the quicker you can go through it and the less intention you have to put into actually doing that, right? And that is something that I'm really starting to come into, especially in terms of my emotions and how I'm feeling. And I don't have to inventory everything that's going on. It's like, oh, that's what this is. And I know what that's from. And I have an understanding of things that work to help get my nervous system back to a place of neutral, which I didn't realize how dysregulated my nervous system was going throughout most of my life.